You know, I became a coach naturally, it seemed, when I was pretty young. In grade 8, I had a really interest in bodybuilding, and personally, I wanted a lot of people around me in order to motivate me to actually go all the time. And in grade 8, there's a lot of other things to do. And I successfully got about 4 or 5 people. And this is in a little tiny town in Cranbrook. And we would go to the gym 3 times a week. And I found that, you know, I had this personal responsibility for these guys that actually are going and spending this time. And so I felt I needed to educate myself on bodybuilding. And so I spent a lot of time looking at technique and form and so on. And we were successful all the way through to high school. And I found that I was able to create a group and motivate them for a long time. And so when I hit university, I found that it just naturally continued in terms of study groups and engineering. And then eventually, when I became a company in coaching, I'd had a lot of practice. Cycling was mainly a transportation. It was like from A to B. When I worked at Zellers or when I worked at Petro-Canada, it was just basically get down there. And I found naturally I would get down there as quickly as I could or get home as quickly as I could. And when I hit Victoria, and after I finished my undergrad in engineering, I wanted to do something. And I joined a club at UVic, and I was introduced to cycling. And I've just never looked back. The friends that I went down to UVic with and did our undergrad, we finished our undergrad 5 years later, and as a celebration, we wanted to do something that was completely out of our realm, and so we entered this triathlon in Whistler. And one of my friends couldn't swim at all, and the other friend didn't want to swim, and so I ended up having to swim, and we did this relay, and it was a short, very short sprint distance triathlon. And so I did the swim, and I thought that I didn't think that I would come out too far behind. We came so far behind in the relay to the individual people that it was really exciting. I thought, holy cow, this has entered a world of people that are really quite amazing, and that got me hooked on triathlon. And I've progressed from there. I moved to Calgary, kept progressing, and I ended up competing in the nationals in half Ironman and Olympic distance, and then finally in the world championships in Hawaii. I find that getting up in the morning, like this early morning, and going to work, I know other people are doing the exact same thing in order to come and be motivated in the group that I've created. And I really enjoy coaching because I actually get to affect people's lives. I get to change their health, their overall lifestyle, a lot of times even their relationship with their families. And I've had people thank me for all the time, and you know, for somebody to say, you know, thank you for improving my health and my relationship with my wife, and just things like that is really inspirational, and it makes it easy. My day looks like I get up really early in the morning to cater to the people that are working, and then I teach throughout the day, and I've been able to tailor my work hours in order that my daughter gets off school at around 3:30, and so I try to work from 5:30 in the morning to about 3, and then I run home, go get my daughter from dance, and like any parent, I found that I've just become a chauffeur in the evening, and so I pick up my daughter, we come back here and feed her, and then I drive her to dance, and then sometimes I'm able to come back here, hang out with my other daughter and my wife, and we play for a bit, and I'm starting to get prepared for the next day. But most of the time, everything outside of my work is centered around my family. I find it increasingly hard to balance work and social life, for sure. Fortunately, a lot of my work creating groups, riding outside, corporate clubs, a lot of that ends up being quite social, so that spurs me on in terms of I don't really need a lot of outside social time. And so, and a lot of times within this community, the people that are riding are my friends anyway. So I end up working and overlapping my social life a little bit. One of the key aspects I've done in order to make sure that it's sustainable is I've created a cycling club. And this cycling club, when I show up to the cycling club, they know that people aren't being coached by me, so I can just relax and ride. Instead of just providing workouts to people in order for performance, I try to create a community for them. And so you'll see I run down to work. Everyone who comes, even at 6 a.m., even though some are still they're dragging their feet in there, they're all looking forward to seeing each other. And and if somebody misses, one guy will be like, "Hey, well, where were you yesterday morning?" And it's really neat to see. Come spring, them all riding outside, and so how I center my work is creating community. And I've been successful creating several corporate clubs these days, as people are coming off the golf course and onto the cycling world. I've been creating these cultures of business networking on the road, and it's been pretty successful. Coaching a triathlete or a cyclist is so different than coaching a traditional North American sport like hockey or football. With something like hockey, it's always in the exact same playing field. There aren't different environmental factors. It's much more of an anaerobic, very short shifts. With cycling especially, the distances are so long that the tactical knowledge that you need to use on the fly over such a huge period is such a challenge, and it's so different than anything like a basketball player. He goes on for maybe a minute or less of a shift, and maybe a little bit more, but there's such a stoppage and play all the time that he can regroup. Whereas cycling, you might be out there for over 6 hours and having to make decisions on who you're going to collaborate with on the road, and you're always thinking about nutrition, pacing, and when are you going to make your move for victory. And the training around that is much more complex than simply being in the same environment or the same atmosphere all the time, like a traditional sport that people might see on TV, like hockey or basketball. So there's so many different variables. It takes quite a few years in order to get the whole feeling of how to race successfully in cycling. And because it's an endurance sport, a young cyclist is 24, 25. Whereas in something like in swimming, where it's very predictable, it's up and down the lanes, an old swimmer is 25. And so it even shows in terms of the age. There's so many elements of triathlon that appeal to me. Just one of the biggest one is probably the diversity of the terrain that you're going to be racing on. If you go in a lot of other sports like hockey or swimming, you're always competing in the same arena. And what I really like about triathlon is the opportunity to travel and go and compete in a different, maybe even a different culture, different terrain, different road surface, and different water temperature, and it's a real challenge. And also with triathlon, you get to use your upper body and your lower body, so you're using quite a range of muscles, and so it appeals a lot to athletes as they grow older, that they're not just running and just using the same muscles over and over. Primarily, I'm a cycling coach that enjoys triathlon, and I do some coaching of triathlons, but I do focus on the cycling, and I really believe that triathletes benefit from learning the intricacies of the cycling component for sure. I think there are so many aspects of cycling that will benefit you as a triathlete if you learn them from a cycling standpoint, not just from a solo triathlete standpoint. I encourage people to try cycling simply because it opens up a whole new world to them in terms of being able to operate in a really healthy lifestyle that's very supportive. You're almost introduced to a whole culture and a community of people that are really encouraging to being able to be healthy enough to maybe go on a cycling vacation or just ride on the weekend and explore your own terrain and around your cities, and just be healthy enough and active enough in order to be able to do anything cardiovascularly that you want at any time. I encourage triathlon if I notice that the athlete is looking for something maybe a little bit different, or if they have a competitive streak in them. A lot of the athletes that I coach don't have that competitive streak, and they simply want to ride and go on a cycling vacation in France or Italy. But if I do see that they're looking for something competitive outside maybe the realm of just cycling events, then I definitely encourage triathlon, and especially if they're looking for something that's more full body, and as they're aging, it's really good to incorporate more of the body than just what cycling gives. I'm lucky enough to have developed my life right now. I am a professional cycling coach and triathlon coach, and that's what I do for work. However, I use my previous work. I'm an engineer at heart, and after I was doing my PhD here at the University of Calgary, and as I was doing my PhD in medical imaging, I was learning how to coach and motivate people at the same time, and I found that there was definitely a parallel there that I could use the two. And so when I graduated, and after a couple of years of working as a research engineer, I found that I was spending most of my time coaching and using the meticulous nature of developing programs and community, that I just decided to become a full professional coach and use the training that I got in university to augment it. You know, I've been at this for a long time, and there's so many examples of people that I've been really proud of over the years, and most of the time it's athletes that have really changed their lifestyle. And I've had athletes in here that have come in here, they're just sick of being sedentary, or they're sick of being injured all the time, and I'm able to provide them with the motivation and the opportunity to have a community around them to encourage them to change the way that they operate. And a lot of times I'll give them this opportunity, and the athletes that I'm most proudest of are the ones that embrace it and really make a change.
I've known Trev for over 8 years. We met when our oldest kids were quite young, and I've been cycling with him for about that long, and he's been coaching me for 5 of those years. I've participated in lots of local events, both in the road bike world and in triathlon, everything from sprint triathlons to half iron distances, such as Calgary 70.3 and Great White North. Two of my favorite competitions have been the Xterra World Championships in Maui, and I've managed to do 2 of those, and they were really exciting and very beautiful venues. I think what divides a good coach from a great coach is that intangible quality that some coaches have to be able to pull the motivation out of the different personality types that they come across. And one of the things that Trev is really good at is figuring out how you're motivated and how to use that as a training tool, and how to keep you focused on some short-term goals, but also those long-term goals that seem so far off in the distance they're hard to focus on. One of the things I think that a lot of people really appreciate about Trev is that he has an endless supply of energy. His storytelling keeps you motivated even when the set that you're working on the bike is terrible and you just want to get through it. For some reason, the combination of his experiences and his energy and his motivation really provide encouragement, and the idea of being able to manage discomfort and being able to put yourself in a position or through a set that you may not be able to do on your own. Some of the skills that I think that are really important for a coach, or things that I think Trev has embodied really well, is the ability to provide balance in programming and to encourage people to seek out not only just that particular skill that's required for that sport, but also to challenge yourself to do something that may be uncomfortable, that's still going to benefit you as an athlete, but maybe encourage you to go try, fat biking in the snow if you've never ridden in the snow before.
I think the key to keep training is to make sure that we realize that what we do is a hobby. Most of the athletes that I train are masters athletes. They've got careers, they've got kids, they've got relationships, and at the moment you start taking yourself too seriously is when it starts to become a little unsustainable. And so what I want to do is provide a community around athletes to make sure that it remains exciting. There's always something new, but it's also, everyone keeps everyone in check to make sure that it doesn't get too serious. One of the things that I like about coaching in my situation of who I coach is the goals are so diverse. Some people come in here and they simply want to just learn how to ride a bike a little bit more safely, want to learn how to ride their bike a little bit more intelligently, and then get some friends and go out and ride. Whereas I have other athletes in here that they have a specific race that they want to develop themselves into, or they want to go on a cycling vacation. When I get athletes to do like a little sprint, say, on their bikes, everyone can always focus for 10 seconds, but when some bike races, or if you go on a cycling vacation and you're going on a 100K ride or 60K ride, those take place over hours, and there's a lot to keep track of. There's nutrition, there's gearing, there's pacing, there's what to even wear and what the appropriate thing. And so I would say one of the most underrated skills in endurance athletes is the ability to have this matrix in your head and be figuring out what are your priorities at that moment, and what's coming up ahead, up on the road, or the weather, and so on. To build the perfect endurance athlete, absolutely would be the ability to prioritize what the body needs at that specific moment, and be able to figure it out under extreme duress. So if we're talking in a race scenario, what kind of nutrition does the body need, what kind of gearing should you be at, your pacing, and then on top of that you have to be figuring out race tactics. In that scenario, what are your specific limiters and strengths, and be able to figure that all out. Living in Calgary, there's a couple aspects that really encourage quality over quantity for sure, and especially the demographic that I cater to, which are usually working professionals with kids. They have other lives, some of them have other hobbies. I really cater quality over quantity, and in that way they can set their hobby into a better framework in terms of their lifestyle. So if for athletes that I coach, I really encourage quality over quantity. For sure, if you're a pro athlete, then you'd want both, and you'd want a lot more quantity, but in order for it to be sustainable and enjoyable, quality is absolutely the key. Weight training is always a contentious topic actually for endurance athletes, especially cyclists, where they're always worried about their weight. However, most of the athletes that I coach, you want to incorporate it, as I always say, you want to grow old gracefully. And so I do encourage people to hit the weight room, the gym, or do something else like Pilates, or something like a class that incorporates lateral movement, backwards movement, and the use of their upper body. Sometimes it's beneficial and sometimes it isn't. When I go into a competition and I'm looking at an athlete, if I'm passing them or they're passing me, and I'm assessing their form on the bike, or I'm looking around in the group that I'm racing, and I'm absolutely using a lot of the aspects that I coach. So for example, if I'm watching a younger athlete and I notice that they're not keeping on top of their nutrition in a long road race, then I know that hopefully I'll have the upper hand on them later on in the event. And whereas that young athlete has no idea what they're doing wrong at that moment.